So you guys know I'm not very technologically savvy, but I'm trying. So actually, this is the first time I take a selfie of my video of myself. But and by the way, this is the law library in my office. Want to tell you about strict interpretation. So I had a case some years ago in which a lady worked for a travel agency. They primarily concentrated on cruises, and she had a written contract, which is unlike most employees, and was working as an inside salesperson. She took orders and booked things. Eventually, the time came when she left. And when she left, she was owed commissions which weren't paid. So we brought suit against the travel agency on her behalf to pay the commissions. The travel agency counterclaimed against her, claiming that she violated a covenant not to compete that was in the written contract. What the covenant said was that she could not be employed in the travel industry for a year after she leaves. What she was doing was working out of her house for herself as an independent contractor, booking cruises, getting groups together, and then placing them with various agencies. So the time came when depositions were taken in the case. In a room similar to this, which is where depositions are often taken, they took my client's deposition first. And when they got to that portion of the written contract regarding the covenant, they asked her, did she understand what that meant? She said, my understanding what that means is that I can't be an employee employed by somebody doing this. And so that was her interpretation. When she was done, we then proceeded to take the deposition of the owner of the travel agency. He was a retired school administrator. And it was very clear, very fast, that he felt very good about himself and was rather proud of himself. So, being the attorney I am, I let him just go ahead and puff himself up, and he did, and told me he had a PhD in contracts, which shocked me because I've been doing contracts for decades, and I don't have a PhD in that. Didn't know there was such a thing. Turns out what he meant was that he had worked in union negotiations, and that was part of what his PhD was on. Whatever. So we're going through all this, and I asked him who drafted the contract, and he said he did. And I said, did you run it by an attorney? And he said, oh, yeah, I did. And I said, what did the attorney tell you? And he said, they told me that it was really good. And right then, my BS detector was going off because it was a terrible contract. It was probably the worst one I've ever seen. Truly, it was horrible. It was filled with ambiguity. Things were not clear. So he's what's called the scrivener. It comes from the word scribe, like in the Old Testament, the person that writes things down. He's the drafting party. So I get down in his deposition to that clause. I asked him, what does he understand that clause to mean? He said, that means you can't work in the travel industry. Okay. I asked him, did you hear what the plaintiff's interpretation was? He said, yes. All right. So is this ambiguous? He said, yes. I said, why didn't you draft it clear? And he gets a smug look on his face and says, because I learned something when I was a school administrator. That's the more unclear and ambiguous you make things, the more the courts are likely to side with the employer. He said that. I looked at his attorney. His attorney looked back at me and flipped me off. Why? Because he knew and I knew that he had just lost the case